Hi, I'm Ralph Demetrius, one of the astrologers of the Planetary calendar, and this is one of our astro portraits. This one is the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He was born on January 25th, 1978, a Wednesday, and they have the time as 2 p.m. in Kristopol, Ukraine. He is an Aquarian. A ninth house Aquarian. He has Sagittarius rising, and he has the moon in Leo. Now, he's after the exact full moon, but it's close enough. It's 5 degrees from Aquarius to 17 degrees Leo. That's very much a full moon child. There's very full expression in his personality. He has Venus partile conjunct with the sun. In other words, same degree, 5 degrees Aquarius, same degree, very close to the midheaven. The midheaven's at 15. The sun and Venus are at 5. This is what's called the Gogolon spot, that area clockwise in the midheaven where there's a lot of leverage in that area. Remember, we use whole sign houses. We don't use Placidus. The midheaven can appear in various different houses, and his appears in the ninth house, which is interesting because it's actually a position for an attorney or for an advocate. Usually presidents will show up in the 10th house. He's an unusual person, though. He has Jupiter rising. He has Gemini rising at 17 degrees, Jupiter at 27 degrees. So that ninth house really plays off of that. And the midheaven is loosely trine that Jupiter, but it gives him a great deal of enthusiasm. Comedian. He was kind of the Jon Stewart of his country in some ways. He was a political commentator, among other things. So he brings that optimism and sense of humor and the wise guyness that Jupiter in Gemini would definitely have. In Leo, where his moon is, the moon sits right in the center at 17. Right at the beginning of Leo, at 0 degrees Leo, is his Mars. So Mars is very prominent in this chart. He has the moon in Jupiter, the moon in 17, the Mars at 0, and then Saturn at 28 degrees Leo. Now that's interesting because at the time when I'm doing this, he has Saturn opposite his Saturn at about 26 degrees Aquarius. And in fact, by sign, he has the opposite Saturn from his country, Ukraine, which has Saturn at, I think, 1 degree Aquarius. So he's a polarity to his country in some ways. He's a very charming person. He's very likable. When people have Venus conjunct the sun, it makes them very charming. There's a whole concept of Cassimi when a planet's in the same sign or if it's in the lights of the sun. They say, oh, well, it really kind of obliterates the energy of the sun. I don't find that to be true. I find that people who have Venus close to the sun tend to be very charming. They tend to just be nice people to be around. They're oftentimes very good looking as well, but people like them. Venus doesn't lose her appeal just because she's close to the sun. Just in the same way that you might say a tremendously good looking person standing next to, the head of a company doesn't lose their beauty. It's there for you to see. It's just part of a bigger picture. With Gemini rising and the sun up in the ninth house, and then the moon and Mars and Saturn in the third house, right? This person's a communicator. I mean, this is communication in high gear. The third house is the house of Gemini, right? So it's a house where he tends to be very creative in his communications. Gemini rising can't shut up. I mean, they just can't shut up. And you have Jupiter there, which just makes it bigger. And then you have the sun and Venus in the ninth house, so it's got a certain Sagittarian quality. We don't like to call Sagittarians know-it-alls, but it's not the worst term that's ever been used for them. I mean, they like to pontificate, and that position is a position you'd oftentimes would find with people who are physicians, counselors, attorneys, professional speakers, educators. What's interesting in the chart is that he has this Jupiter over by the rising, and the Mars over there. Well, but then he has this big collection over there of planets in the west. Once you get to the west, you have the Venus, the Sun, Mercury, Juno, Ceres, Neptune, Pallas, Vesta, Uranus, Pluto, all over there in the West. It's the place of other people. In other words, he's not motivated by his own personal drive. He listens to other people. He has the capability of listening to what other people are going to say. This is great for a politician. He's willing to listen. He has Jupiter at the rising, Jupiter in Gemini. The thing about Jupiter in Gemini is it loves to engage. Gemini loves to engage. They want to know what you think. They want to tell you what they think, but they want to know what you think. They like the interchange. The Mars in Leo, it's a very brave position, especially in the third house. He has no problem speaking up. Okay, the Moon is there, so he has no problem getting his emotions behind his thoughts. He has Saturn there, so he thinks about it. He's serious about it. This is something that's important to him. It also relates to his career, to his ambitions. But all that stuff over in the Western Hemisphere, it means there's a real interest in working with others. And you can't go into politics if you're not interested in working with others. It's all about partnership. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic that goes on in his personality, that he seems so, ready to engage. The Mars, the Jupiter, ready to engage things. And yet, he doesn't want to do it alone. He wants to work in partnership with other people. And it's kind of interesting, too, that when the Russians were invading and everyone was saying you should get out of town, take the family and maybe leave the country, he didn't. He and his family hunkered down. His family's still in the city with him. He's there at the royal palace in his T-shirt. The everyman. Gemini rising, the everyman. He's still there. That Mars in Leo, that Moon in Leo in the third house. He's not a person who's easily disengaged from where he is. He's not someone who's easily pushed over. He's not someone who he doesn't scare easily. Let's put it that way. Okay. Now, when we look at the chart for his country, right? We look at Ukraine. Ukraine has Saturn in Aquarius, within 4 degrees of his sun and his Venus, right? So they have a Saturn-Sun, Saturn-Venus connection. Saturn-Venus connections are famous for making long-term relationships. If you're ever looking for a relationship, you meet someone who's got, you have a Saturn-Venus connection to them. It actually works really well because Venus likes the structure that Saturn provides, and Saturn likes the sharingness and the willingness to engage that Venus provides. Saturn always is seeking harmonious structures. Because it's Saturn in Aquarius, that's a rulership position. The Sun is in Aquarius, it's actually a weak position. What actually connects even more is the Venus. The Venus is actually a stronger connection to that Saturn than the Sun is. To a certain extent, that Saturn from Ukraine kind of suppresses his energy. I mean, he really feels the weight of his responsibilities. The weight of Saturn, he carries it on his shoulders. He's someone who's willing to carry the country on his back. And that's how he feels he has to do. He feels the weight of that. The Sun for Ukraine is at 0 degrees Virgo. So their Sun positions from Virgo to Aquarius are quincunx. That's the position of Venus and Mars. So, the rulerships of Venus and Mars are quincunxes. This is a love affair for him. His relationship with his country, it goes beyond the bounds of this is a logical. I did it for a good reason. It wasn't any good reason. It just was a spontaneous. He fell in love with his country, with the idea of his country. The fact that the Venus was there, it was like a lightning bolt. One day he realized he had to do this. And he's been doing it ever since. The Moon in Leo that he has that Mars, Moon, Saturn in Leo, fits in perfectly with Ukraine's Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, and Vesta in Leo. he understands. He's willing to fight for Ukraine's sense of sovereignty. You know, the Venus, Jupiter, Mercury. Venus is the women, right? Jupiter are the businesses. Mercury are the children. He approaches it with his Mars. He's willing to put himself there in the front. He approaches it with his Moon, his willingness to put his emotions on the line. He puts his Saturn there. He will make a wall with himself. I mean, that's a thoroughly committed person, and yet it goes beyond the reasonable. It goes into the realm of love. And that's, it's a love story in many ways. It's a love story during a particularly difficult Saturn return that Ukraine is having, because Saturn is passed over Ukraine's Saturn, and they are in the Saturn return, the compression that they're feeling because of the invasion of their neighbor. So Zelenskyy is a remarkable person, very bright, very willing to think outside the box, and yet his heart just carries him through. His beliefs are deeply held, and it's what sustains him. It's what sustains him. So that's the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Please come see us on Tuesdays when we do these portraits, and then come see us on Fridays when we do the forecast for the coming week. You will find them at Planetary Calendar, Astrology, and YouTube. Please subscribe. It's a big help to us, and you'll maybe learn a couple of things. Come see us on Fridays when we do those forecasts, so you'll know what's going on, and you can follow along in the Planetary Calendar. And if you need your Planetary Calendar in the 5 different formats, you can find those at planetarycalendar.com. Until next time, be well.